All right, Christian, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. My story, I work at DeliverThat. I'm the vice president of operations here right now. I started about 6 years ago and signed up to be a catering driver. So we work with independent contract catering drivers. I was going to Ohio State, signed up to be a contract driver with DeliverThat. The process to get started, you take a catering order, you learn the pickup, the setup process, and the person teaching me that was actually our founder, Aaron Hoffman, one of our co-founders, Aaron Hoffman. And yeah, I got his cell phone number. I just kept badgering him, kept badgering him. As soon as I graduated from Ohio State, I moved out to Phoenix to start the West Coast expansion for DeliverThat. Fast forward, make a very long 6 year journey pretty short. Eventually, I moved back to Ohio when things got more legitimized as a business, and started as director of operations when I got back here. Worked my way up.
Man, that's awesome. And I always thought people who went to Ohio State called it the Ohio State.
The Ohio State. You know, when you do something in this format, that's always good to joke with your buddies about. But in this format, I don't want to give off that vibe.
Yeah, I always think I just see it from watching football, and they always say the Ohio State, which is, as a foreign person, has always cracked me up. Those introductions always do, but also the Ohio State is the one that stands out to me.
Yeah.
That cracks me up. But that's amazing, man, that you had them. And you've been there a long time now, so you've obviously had a couple of roles in the organization as well.
Yeah, you bet. So I kind of cycled through it. At first, it was like a glorified general manager role when I first got back to the office. So anybody was out for the day, I would hop into that seat, that role, and help out. Fast forward, I guess when really the pandemic hit us the hardest and catering took a dive, I really focused on the recruiting piece and how we could make that a virtual onboarding process for our drivers. So I was
Yeah.
very recruiting centric, I guess, for probably about a year and a half of my time here. And then you kind of get to the finish line of that, and we have more stability of our day to day workforce, and it becomes a lot of people leadership, documenting processes. We really bootstrapped this thing. So I also was really heavily involved with our co-founder Aaron, on the technical side as we got things off the ground and how we work with our third-party vendors, our CRM system. We've worked with some automation companies where it's zero code is involved, so it was things that we could figure out and really just grind it out together.
How was that experience? I know the no code is a real big promise of making one's life very, very simple, but I too
Yeah.
have dabbled and I too know the stress that comes with these no code tools.
Yeah, it's been really fun. For me, it's always been motivating that I can learn things and kind of be an entrepreneur inside of the company.
Yeah.
Not have as much risk, but have all the freedom of like, hey, we need somebody to learn this software, dive into this, lead this project and stuff. So for me, it was really fun to learn the systems, but I mean, we maxed it out in every way, right? If you look at competitors like a DoorDash or an Uber Eats with DeliverThat, and they're in a separate niche, but they're still third party delivery. There's
Yeah.
so much technology on those teams, and here we are just chipping away with no code, trying to piece together a couple different third parties as we were coming up.
Man, I worked at a company before where Airtable was basically our database.
Yeah.
And to make a query would honestly take minutes.
Yep.
Like that was, I know, it was like, yeah. And I thought it was actually a very special sort of badge of honor for a startup that instead of using like a big query or a professional grade, enterprise grade sort of database, we were using a $10 a head SaaS to like basically manage until we basically evolved out of that. So like, I know exactly where you're coming from. I guess my first question to you, I mean, first major question is always like the real kind of like conversation starter for all these episodes, which is like, in your role and to deliver that, like, what do you think are your three biggest roadblocks or challenges that you're facing, that you're seeing?
Roadblocks that we're seeing. I think for us, it's still we're evolving out of technology being the hurdle, but it's interesting in the restaurant landscape that we operate in.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different POS system,
Yeah.
online order management. A lot of restaurants are really great at one or two things. Usually, technology is not the top of that list, right? So they're using another vendor to power a lot of things internally. And now that's not true for all restaurants, but for us, it's about ease of use from a restaurant standpoint, right? We want to make sure whatever POS system you're working with or online order management
Yeah.
tool, marketplace that you're on, it's a click of a button or even no clicks for you to seamlessly send deliveries to us here at DeliverThat. So technology is probably one of them and will always continue to be one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, two others. I would say it's just always, it will always not necessarily be a roadblock, but be our calling card to manage contract drivers the way that
Yeah.
we are, right? So we've built out a US based call center. We're trying to provide them best in the world experience and customer service when it comes to what it looks like for a gig economy worker. We're not having them jump through the chat bots and all the hoops you might have to go through on another platform to talk to an agent. We're still live texting with our drivers, right? So they just send us a text message like anyone else in their contacts. They call
Yeah.
us. We're trying to get on the phone in 60 seconds or less, resolve their problems, anything that they're going through. So not necessarily a roadblock, but for us, I would say that's like such a big emphasis at all times. And the
Yeah.
more that you scale, right, it's way different dealing with 4,000 active contract drivers a week than it was when we started out. And it's almost like you're managing 100 relationships on a weekly basis. So the scale of it and being standardized, I guess, as our approach to those relationships and that service is a challenge for us. And then really the last one is still like technology based, but for us is like perfecting the driver application that they're using, right? We've really ramped things up on our side. And so with that comes lots of feedback from drivers, anything they run into from an app standpoint. We're really up against the industry giants because we'll have drivers sign up. It's their first time being on a catering specific platform. They're expecting all of the bells and whistles when it comes to the distribution of jobs, how we're routing deliveries for them
Yeah.
from a tech standpoint. Any glitches that take place in the app, those things have to get escalated and resolved really quickly. So those are kind of, I wouldn't even say the biggest roadblocks aside from technology being one, but those are our biggest opportunities to continue,
Yeah.
rocking out for our drivers.
Totally. I guess like the inverse of like the challenge is the opportunity.
Yeah.
If you solve these challenges, like you'll by order of magnitude improve your business.
Yeah.
I guess the question, like when you talk about like the expectations of the driver or the couriers, or what word do you use to describe them as the drivers, or like
Yeah, for us, there are driving partners, but
driving
I
partners?
guess as you would categorize them to the industry, they're all independent contract delivery drivers with us. Yeah.
How do you how do they even get sourced? Like, because I would imagine that like in terms of mind share, people who are like, I'm going to be an independent contractor, or it's like I'm going to be an Uber driver, or I'm going to be a Lyft driver, or like I'm going to be any number of
Yeah.
of the ones I know of. So I'm curious, like how they kind of end up with you guys and how you guys manage your sort of acquisition of these types of drivers.
For sure. So we work with some of like the major job boards, and we have in the past. We'll continue to do so. So places like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Monster. We work with these job board sites. But what I would say is really shocking to me, because I've talked to some of the other industry players, is just the word of mouth that takes place in the gig economy, right? Like people aren't going and necessarily finding Uber on ZipRecruiter and signing up for them, or a major job board like a ZipRecruiter. They know about it because they see other people in their space. So if I'm a DoorDash driver or an Uber Eats driver and I'm waiting in a restaurant lobby and somebody walks in with a cart that says DeliverThat on the side and 3 thermal catering bags that say DeliverThat, well, immediately that interaction takes place. Hey, who are you driving for? How can I sign up, and things like that. So I've realized that underneath the, I guess the big picture perspective of it, there's a pretty tight knit community when it comes to gig economy workers, where they're actively exchanging information. They're following YouTube influencers who take them on ride-alongs of what it's like a day in the life of a dasher or a top dasher, an elite DeliverThat driver. So I think a lot of it for us has been word of mouth, and taking it back to the service levels. The better we keep that, the easier it is for them to say, hey, not only am I making a ton of money on this, but check this out. My order's not ready. Watch this phone call, right? They get us on the phone.
Yeah.
somebody's excited to talk to them and they're just like, hey, there's a difference. What's happening at DeliverThat? So it all comes back to that experience for us.
Do you know what's interesting? As in, like, this is like probably either the 15th or the 16th podcast I've recorded in the last 10 days, 2 weeks. And
On your grind. I love that.
I'm on my grind. Get that content out.
That's
And
it. That's it.
it's interesting that you are the first person, no joke, that has not put staffing in your top 3 as an issue, as a roadblock. And it's interesting, like, I guess, because I'm meeting all types of operators in hotels, resorts, restaurant chains, franchise groups that are responsible for, like yourself, a whole range like of operational needs, not just like a staffing thing. And it's interesting because you're dealing with independent contractors, and I would imagine you need a volume of those to meet the demand, because obviously you don't want people like waiting. Because again, I guess you're dealing with food, which is even more pressure ridden, because obviously if somebody doesn't get the right thing, or if it's cold, or if it's any number of different things, that it's like that angers people probably a bit more than an Uber just not showing up to somebody.
100%.
I'm actually color me shocked here that that is not in your top 3 that come to mind. Fascinating in and of itself.
Yeah, and I think too, when I look back and think, okay, we started out with like, it was like 5 other people and myself back in 2018 when I was getting out of college and getting started with us. Everything from that point forward, whether it's the relationships we have with the marketplace, aggregators that we work with, the large restaurant groups we work with, or how we went about sourcing internal W-2 hourly or salary employees, and then again, how we source drivers. It's all just like a partnership mentality. It's all about the experience that people have when they're dealing with you, because we were up against it, right? Like there's industry giants who have tons of funding, engineers, things like that. But we were able to make things work and piece things together because we always approach things transparently. If somebody was signing up to be an employee, we're not going to sugarcoat the fact that there's 10 of us in an office space in Canton, Ohio, and we're trying to figure out how to deliver food, but here's where we see this going long term. And same thing with a restaurant partner or a driving partner. It's like, we're never going to sugarcoat that we're not perfect, but that we're always striving for that. So many of our internal employees at this point are friends of someone who worked here, who maybe even waited months until we were ready to hire again. But the person inside this office kept telling them, hey, I know you work at this call center that I left. I promise you it's different over here. You will really enjoy your day-to-day work. So that's how I look at it for kind of the triangle for us, which is partners who really cut the checks, pay the bills, drivers who make that possible, and then our internal staff that's really pushing this forward into the future. It's just partnerships and experience.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess stemming from that, I mean, because you guys are, almost like growth hacking your way versus these like extreme behemoths that exist around you, and are able to compete with them. And I'm curious, like, what trends are you kind of seeing within the sort of food delivery space that's accelerated by COVID, but that you expect to be like sort of like common in the next like 2 or 3 years, or just normal from boomers to Gen Z will be just a normal food delivery experience? Like, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, I'll say the first thing that comes to mind when you say things like that, we have established great working relationships with restaurants who not only would they not give us the time of day when I was first getting started and we're pitching this to them, but they wouldn't really give the time of day to almost any third party delivery provider, right? It was very much like, this is our brand. We are going to protect it to the nth degree. And for DeliverThat, no one goes to our website and orders food. So if we're not driving a transaction to a restaurant, we better be very, very good and send them professional level drivers if we're just providing that last mile piece, right? So fast forward through the pandemic, and the acceleration I've seen that is kind of the restaurants relinquishing control and starting to develop some trust of, hey, it's not realistic for us to have the vans, the insurance, the W-2 employees internally. We need to, for financial reasons and even for quality reasons, hand this over to somebody who all they do is eat, sleep, and do delivery, right? And it's like, that's where we've been so focused for so long that I'm confident in what we can execute in that last mile. But early on, it was very much like, no, you don't understand. Here's how we present
Yeah.
our catering. It's got to be in a 10-minute window. We have to be at that drop off. So just a level setting from that side of like restaurants really coming to terms. And I think into the future, we will see that continuous trend of um, giving up some of the delivery operations or all of the delivery operations from
Yeah.
some major brands who haven't done that in the past.
I think that's very interesting. And I think, like the presentation of food and the expectation of what that is. Like, I think like when it's the evolution of that has been a sight to see, like restaurant grade food getting delivered in such a way that, you know, like that people would even consider that as an option. And I know you
Yes.
guys are obviously delivering a catering. And so like I always think of these that when I was reading up on you guys, I was always thinking about like, when you buy from Amazon, for example, and when you buy like Tide detergent in the store, when you see Tide, it's always in like the bottom shelf. And it's always got a handle. And it's like, why? Because it's heavy and you have to like pick it up and scoop it off the ground. But that sort of design aesthetic is kind of irrelevant for buying it online.
Yeah.
And so like how soon until like something like Amazon just says it's all going to come in a Tetra Pak because we can mail it as its own box, or it comes in a hard enough box that we can just mail it to you as it is, as it looks like their own Amazon brand. And that experience, that it would be jarring for people to understand almost now. You're like, why is the handle being mailed to me and all that extra space that's being wasted,
Yeah.
versus like, and same kind of concept when I think of like what you're doing is like, I think like a lot of like the evolution of like these food businesses, like these, ghost kitchens becoming a thing now. I saw actually a very funny TikTok that like had like 1 million likes or something. That was like, Google a restaurant you see on like your app and see what the address is. And it's like, this is where all your food's getting prepared. And I think people are waking up to ghost kitchens now, that
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
kind of things exist. And it's like, yeah, it just creates more options, more like the restaurants themselves and the brands themselves know like the margin that they can make on online now. It's like, and I presume with you guys, that's like the key value prop to you. Like, what
Yeah.
additional value are you bringing the brands and the restaurants you're working with that deliver the food at scale, that they don't need to keep their own vans and drivers really anymore, that they can rely on you guys to deliver an even better experience,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting too, going back to the ghost kitchen piece and the commissary kitchen piece. That would be another trend that's like, that's not going anywhere. And I think brands will continue to really capitalize that. We
Yeah.
um we have a local barbecue place here in Northeast Ohio, and they have or had a ghost brand inside of them, right? And it was it was tacos. It was like Mexican food, totally different cuisine than what they're actually advertising. But as you perfect a model like that, right, especially catering, right, that's kind of my space here,
Yeah.
is like there are offices that cater for their team every day of the week. But if you want to compete with an online marketplace that has every available option, you as an operator would then have to
Yeah.
assume that you have to prepare different cuisines, right? They're not going to order barbecue food 5 days a week, but they might order barbecue food, Mexican, and deli foods one day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's totally possible to do that out of one kitchen. So it's interesting you bring that up, because I've always said, like, I can't go into the store around here and order their Mexican food, but it's my favorite. It's what I'll order
Yeah.
online every single time. It's delicious.
Totally. Totally. And like, tell me, like, in terms of like the emerging tech, because you guys are an emerging tech, like, are there things that are like in the technology side of things that are exciting you? Like, what innovations have you seen that you're like, woof, either by you guys or by like the industry as a whole? Is there anything like AI? I mean, everyone talks about AI now, so it's like, oh, AI. Like,
Yeah.
are things like that are exciting you?
I think there's just some places that we work with, and I won't get like too specific, but that
It's
are
fine.
really like enabling the restaurant to take control of their approach to their sales and marketing, right? So when I think of some other third parties like an Uber or a DoorDash, their huge value proposition is we own the customers, right? So the customers are going to DoorDash.com or UberEats.com and placing these orders. That transaction, yes, it benefits the restaurant, but at some point, they really don't have a ton of
Yeah.
leverage against these third parties. They're relying on the revenue stream, but at the same time, if there is a renegotiation that takes place, that revenue is being sourced by the marketplaces themselves. So it's really interesting to me to see some of the partnerships we're establishing where they're giving that control back, and they're just trying to help from a technology standpoint, make everything look and feel just as beautiful as any of the marketplaces that restaurateurs
Yeah.
are competing against, and empower them to, hey, you can take back control of some of the margins here. You need a team that's going to help drive these transactions, but make great food and we'll make your website look great. We'll make the transactions as seamless as possible for the customer. So it's fascinating to me to see how restaurants are starting to leverage technology like that to
Yeah.
take back control of their off-premise operation.
Yeah. Who was I reading? There was I saw I was one large chain are building their own version of Olo now. That like again, like
Mm-hmm.
taking this sort of data in-house.
Yep.
And you know, from like types of businesses that you would never consider traditionally sort of technology businesses are now, you know, like the famous phrase like software's eating the world, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's coming around to restaurant business and hospitality now. Like, and I'm curious, you know, like, because it's interesting because you're a young man yourself. You only graduated college about 4 years ago, so you're like in your mid-20s, I'd say.
Sure.
And so, like, you know, you coming into the workforce and coming in like after COVID. I mean, you guys have been doing this since like basically since COVID. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm curious as well, like, you know, or not since COVID, but like, you know, in and around the kind of year, very
Yeah.
like in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
And, you know, like your peers and everything, it's like interesting. Is there like a different take that you guys are bringing? Because you're like, how you much younger you are than say like the rest of the market that you're buying from. You know, I
Yeah.
see that the conferences that like, you know, it's definitely you know, in the plus 40s, kind of 50s, a lot of the age group that like I see like even in our own business, like of like our type of
Yeah.
client, you guys are so young that I'm just curious, like, do you guys see like a kind of an opportunity to be the young upstarts or whatever?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some rooms that we'll end up in where that's very much the dynamic of the relationship or even just the perception of
Yeah.
things. But I will say it's benefited us a ton, and we do have a pretty low average age across, I would say, the leadership group specifically, but our entire operations team as a whole has a pretty young average age. And I
Yeah.
think it's just really helped us to be open-minded to everything, and I
Yeah.
guess creative in our approach, where, like, even talking about where we started some of this conversation, but bootstrapping some of the technology and not looking at it as, hey, we need to rely on our account rep to help us with X, Y, and Z, but we'll just roll up our sleeves and say, hey, what can this thing do, right? What can our CRM do? What can this no code
Yeah.
automation platform do? And figure things out. So not even like an industry perception, but I would say just the culture of our work and the direction that we're headed has seemed so just straightforward to me, because everybody wants to keep learning. Everybody is all in to try the 30-day trial of this, the 30-day trial of that,
Yeah.
and see what can bring value to our business. Whereas that other age group or some of the partners that we work with are very slow moving on those things, right? If we're making impactful
Yeah.
decisions on a weekly basis and they're doing that on a quarterly or an annual basis, well, then, eventually those big decisions and direction of things will kind of stack up, and it gives us a little advantage there.
Totally, man. I see the same even with ours because we sell into obviously similar kind of businesses as yours.
Mm-hmm.
And I turn around to my marketing team and I'm like, guys, we're probably the only business in the United States that are probably doing this for in our like competitive suite. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Against our competitive, like I have no doubt that some of the things we're doing that are like pretty innovative, as they say, or
Yeah.
pretty like
Yeah.
fun to like, you know, acquire the businesses for us. I guess, you know, like, you know, when you think about like your own sort of like the operational sort of like needs of your org and it kind of stems from you, would you consider yourself like the kind of just that decision maker, that person? Like, do you feel like the weight of responsibility on you sometimes? Like, because really like the technological changes you need that we've spoken about are like no code to like custom code to like paying in for like some very serious like software. Like these are huge decisions, you know. Like, are
Yep.
you the man for that, or like how does it work typically?
I think our leadership team
Yeah.
as a whole has a great dynamic where everyone kind of has a voice, and it all really does funnel up to our CEO. So there's, I guess, three people right now who have really strong voices at the table of like the direction. Our
Yeah.
CTO, he was brought on last year, Matt, and then our co-founder Aaron is still incredibly heavily involved in the business and driving the direction of this.
Yeah.
And then we do a great job of dialoguing. Hey, here's what I see from my seat. What are you seeing? That conversation's had in front of the CEO. Sometimes we reach a consensus. Sometimes there are tons of questions being answered. And then the decision maker ultimately is Darian as the CEO. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this last year of our journey has been to expand the people at that leadership table.
Yeah. Key.
And again, just the partnerships and the relationship building that goes into that stuff has been so cool to see, because for me it was a long time,
Yeah.
probably 4.5 years we had the same people at the table, you know, on each of these leadership meetings. And then very quickly over the span of a year, we'll call it, we've expanded, and that leadership room has almost doubled during that time. And everyone is voicing their questions, their opinions, their concerns. And I just love the free flowing communication. So yeah, I'm one of decision makers around here, but not what I would consider the decision maker.
I mean, it's great. I mean, you know, to be fair, I think it's great like that. That's kind of like how you're feeling about it. I mean, I speak to so many people that are like, I'm in an island, you know, or they're like,
Yeah,
I guess the weight of the world and justifying ROI on software and really trying to
right.
figure out the incremental gains and benefits from like applying new software and running new strategies is like, it's a lot, you know, and it's great to hear that you've got such a great support system there and there's a real team to kind of help you all in the buying committee process, you know?